Thank y'all for being here today. My name is Helena Rolden. Again, I've been probably 24 years the employee assistance provider for Infirmary Health System, and that's been a huge honor to work with so many wonderful people and to do my small part in helping face the challenges presented in healthcare. And certainly this last, as y'all know, this last 18 months have been just a tremendous strain and challenge. But just a bit about me, I am a counselor by profession, so first thing, I'm not very technical, so I've got two people sitting in this room with me, Chewy and Braden, to help me get through this if any technical issues come up. But I'm a therapist by profession. Typically do individual and family counseling. And because I've seen folks from the infirmary either with work stress or home stress, or typically both, I hope I have some insight to offer you. And I'd like to remind you that you're part of the infirmary system, and this year has been stressful on you. As I talk today, I am going to remind you of what you already know. Chances are good that I will not tell you anything that you don't already know. Hopefully I'll remind you of it and perhaps put it in a context for you that will enable you to help yourself through some of these stressors and consequently help your staff through some of these stressors. So let's get started. Today I'm going to refer to the self-assessment and the scoring of the Maslach Burnout Inventory that was sent to you. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take that inventory and do your self-scoring sheet. That way we're going to have have some input about that. So hopefully you've had a chance to do that. We're going to talk about that Maslach Burnout Inventory, which is kind of the gold standard for burnout assessment. We're very well researched and documented. Then I've got this the talk divided up into two sections. Obviously the problem, what is burnout? What does it look like? How does it manifest in individuals and the workplace? And then hopefully we're going to talk a lot about the solution, about what to do on an individual basis if you scored high on the burnout inventory and you have an understanding of how the parasympathetic nervous system works. You can activate your own sprinkler system. I'm going to use an analogy about fire alarms and sprinkler systems, and I hope that I don't beat that too much into the ground, but I think it's very appropriate analogy because we've been in a fire. Our house has been burning down for the last year and a half, and our fire alarms are going off. Okay, so on your worksheet, I'd like for you to reference the three columns, EE, DP, and PA. EE stands for emotional exhaustion. This is the depletion of everything in the person. We used to talk about compassion fatigue. This is the end result of compassion fatigue, where an individual just does not feel like they have anything left to give. DP stands for depersonalization, and that happens when we are emotionally exhausted and we don't feel like there's any solution. It's a psychological mechanism in which we take a psychological step back and we begin to see the world, not in personal terms, but in terms that keep us emotionally from connecting with the world. And then there's PA. PA stands for personal achievement. Personal achievement is really helpful in combating burnout. So on your worksheets, we asked you to total. So in this domain, EE, high scores on EE, DP, and then a low score on PA, as you see here. A score of above 27 on emotional exhaustion, a score of above 10 on depersonalization, and a low score equals above 40 on personal achievement. Those are the 3 domains of burnout that we are going to be talking about today. So, to back up just a second, burnout is not stress. Stress is simply the body's response to any change that's required of it. These changes can be mental, physical, emotional. Stress can be very helpful and necessary. Stress helps motivate us. Stress, particularly that we can predict and manage, is very helpful. It's when unmanaged stress begins to rear its head that it becomes destructive. Stress over which we feel like we have no control, or when it becomes overwhelming, that begins the progression into burnout. And burnout is defined as a state of chronic, unmanaged stress that leads to those 3 domains: physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, and a sense of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. Those 3 things taken together lead to an inability to function successfully on both a personal and professional level. Here you see those 3 domains intersecting each other, and at the middle is burnout. This is kind of a graphic representation of how those scores come together to create burnout. So, I'd like to reference back to school or your clinical work. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is our internal fire alarm. It tells us to run or fight. It tells us that our personal building, so to speak, is on fire and that we are in life-threatening danger. That we have no control. That fire alarm bypasses our conscious control. We have no control over that response. It immediately dumps adrenaline and cortisol into our system. It revs our heart up. It makes our pupils see only what is in front of us. Our lungs become bronchodilated in order to consume more oxygen to get us ready to fight or run. Digestion shuts down. We sweat. We have increased blood flow to our muscles and decreased blood flow to our extremities. Our metabolism increases to get us ready to run. Because, for obvious reasons, we lose interest in sex. I mean, if you're in life-threatening danger, you're not going to think about your sexual interest. The end result of all of this is that the immune system shuts down, which in these days and times is a little scary. Because what's happened, in my estimation, what's happened over the past 18 months is we're all on fire internally. All of our fire alarms have gone off, and we are been deluged with adrenaline and cortisol, And so if we're constantly in that fight or flight mode, and if the end result is suppression of the immune system, in addition to all those other bodily impacts, we're in trouble. So that's the sympathetic. Just reminding you that's the sympathetic nervous system, and we have no control over that. Then there's the parasympathetic nervous system. This is our internal sprinkler system. This is what brings the water to the fire and allows us to cool down, rest, and digest. It's the part of the brain that tells us that the emergency is over and we're going to be okay, and to resume normal bodily functions. Brings our heart rate back to baseline. Eyesight goes back to normal. We begin to secrete our salivary glands in order to prepare for appetite and digestion. Our sexual interest returns over time because we're not in a life-threatening emergency anymore, and we can resume normal functioning. And last but certainly not least, when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, our immune system is activated. Really good news. While we do not have any conscious control over the sympathetic nervous system, we do have some control over the parasympathetic nervous system. We can do some things to deliberately activate our internal sprinkler system and perhaps help ourselves put out that internal fire. So, if we think about our fire alarm, what triggers our fire alarm? Why does it go off? We have some internal and some external triggers. The internal triggers primarily are our perceptions, and that's our thoughts. I'd like for you to just kind of check into that chatter that happens in your head. We all have it. If the chatter starts with phrases like, oh my God, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not good enough to take care of these patients? What if I can't handle what they're asking of me? I'll get fired. I'll lose my job, and then I'll be in bankruptcy, and I'll be a failure. That will be horrible. They are against me. They really don't care. And then, of course, I'll lose my license. Imagine if the chatter in your head were that. Essentially, that's your brain goes, this is a life-threatening emergency. The perception of that thought, that way of thinking is, I am in a life-threatening emergency, so your brain starts dumping adrenaline. And then there's our internal biofeedback, which says, if I feel this way, if I feel this scared, then there must be something to be scared of. So therefore, I need to panic. And if I feel this scared, then where's it coming from? Why am I feeling this scared? Well, it must be my manager. It must be my coworkers are lazy. It must be something out there. But then I have no control over that, so I've got to panic. And now we're panicking about panic. And of course, there's the external triggers, things that happen around us. Deadlines, sometimes deadlines that we can't meet. Absolutely news and social media. The news, which is telling us panic, 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 and by the way, come back after the next commercial and we'll tell you why you should panic some more. That tells our brain that this is a life-threatening emergency. Social media is particularly damaging for that. Sometimes meetings can be a trigger for our fire alarm. Certainly bills, childcare. Childcare has been a big issue this past year. When people are thinking, I've got to go to work, but schools are closed, and what if my primary caregiver has COVID? What am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll get fired and lose my job, and then I'll be in bankruptcy. And so we're constantly flooded. Certainly death or illness, and we've all experienced that, either the death of our patients or death of our own loved ones and friends is a trigger for this. This is real. This is a life-threatening emergency. I'd like for you to know that sometimes if you are supervising other people, that by definition you are a trigger sometimes for your staff. When you come walking up innocently and you've got a staff member that's thinking all of that panicky thinking, when that staff member sees you, they go, oh my God, here it comes, I'm going to get fired. And of course, you're just innocently walking up. So just be aware that there's triggers everywhere that gets that or that reinforces that adrenaline. Folks with a history, a personal history of trauma, be it physical, sexual abuse, emotional trauma, certainly are at higher risk for burnout. So, what happens if we're in a building and the fire alarm goes off and we all ignore it? I've been in buildings like that before where people will say, don't worry about it, fire alarm doesn't work. But I think when we just suck it up and keep on going, when we don't talk about what's going on with us, that essentially is ignoring our own internal fire alarm and perpetuates and makes worse the burnout. Okay, I've got some downhill progression of symptoms listed here, and they're all pretty obvious. But early on in burnout is marked by heightened emotionality and hyperactivity. And when you think about that, that's pretty obvious. If I'm flooded with adrenaline, then I'm going to be hyper aware, I'm going to be hyperactive. Perhaps my emotional brakes won't work quite as much because I'm being flooded. Fatigue. Physiological changes begin to happen, and I'll reference you back to the sympathetic nervous system going off all the time. That's taken its toll on its body. So we have physiologic changes. Certainly anxiety. If my internal self is telling me that I'm in a life-threatening emergency 24/7, I am going to be anxious. And if I'm anxious enough, I'm going to be extremely irritable. If I'm simply doing the best I can to put one foot in front of the other, and then you ask me to do an extra task, I'm going to snap. I'm going to snap because I can't take one more thing. Difficulty concentrating and frequent forgetfulness. Again, there's so much going on internally that a person is capable of being easily distracted and forgetting a task that maybe under average circumstances they would do easily. And of course that can become the panic thinking, oh my God, I forgot that, what's wrong with me, I'm losing my mind, I must be going crazy, which reinforces the fire alarm. At this point, this is when the burnout is really getting entrenched. There's a decrease in motivation because that personal achievement is beginning to be impacted. The thinking being nothing matters, it doesn't matter what I do. And then a flattening of emotion. There's that emotional exhaustion where a person's not capable of normal emotional response anymore because the neurotransmitters are so depleted. feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, loss of meaning. Certainly somatic illness and chronic exhaustion. That kind of goes without saying. If I'm flooded with adrenaline and if my heart rate is up and, it makes absolute sense that somatic illnesses can take hold. Essentially, the end result is to be cynical and negative about everything. What you may have or pre-burnout have been a very motivated, highly skilled professional who was functioning well in all areas of the life is now not functioning at all, and all they can think about is going home and going to bed, or yet worse, all they can think about is perhaps life is too much trouble. So, we've talked about the fire, we've talked about the fire alarm, we've talked about the internal and external process that leads to burnout, the emotional exhaustion, the depersonalization, and the lack of personal achievement and meaning. By the way, I had a conversation with somebody this weekend that I found interesting. I've had a hard time in the last year and a half with people wearing masks for several reasons. One, I'm hearing impaired, but the bigger piece is because I'm a therapist, I rely on body language and expression so much to communicate. Well, with people wearing masks, which are good, you're disconnected from the feedback about how they are interacting with you. I think maybe that's contributed to some of the depersonalization that we're seeing. Anyway, that was a side comment. So we've heard about the fire alarm. We know that adrenaline and cortisol are the raging fire inside. They're keeping us agitated. They're keeping us on overload. They're the gasoline. Clearly the solution is to do two things. Put out the fire and activate the sprinkler system, the parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, we do have some deliberate control over the parasympathetic, and we are able to do some things to help ourselves activate that part of our brain. So, turn on the sprinkler. How do we do that? It is our absolute personal responsibility to take care of ourselves, and we have to turn on our sprinkler. So, what does turning on the sprinkler look like? This is just a quick list. It's by no means exhaustive. Just want to give you some ideas. What activates that part of our brain that says it's okay to go back to baseline, it's okay to rest and digest? And spending time in nature is wonderful. Going for a walk in the woods, sitting on the beach, just sitting outside listening to the birds. It's kind of my personal concern that so many people that work 12-hour shifts in a hospital, they spend 12 straight hours in an air-conditioned, stressful building. They don't get out in nature, understandably. So deliberately and mindfully making time to get outside, to get in nature, tells our brain we're okay. Get a massage. Yeah, right. Massage is wonderful. And if you can't get go get a professional massage, touch. Touch tells our brain that we're connected with other people. Holding somebody's hand, just rubbing, even rubbing your own hand. Touch activates our parasympathetic nervous system. Practice meditation. I'm gonna, with you, do a guided meditation later on in the presentation. But meditation can be tons of things. It's time to just be still and quiet. It's time to focus on what brings you calm and peace in whatever way that is. So I encourage you to do that. My favorite source of that is YouTube. That's my personal favorite. YouTube is full of all kind of different meditations. Find what you like. All I do is enter in the search bar I enter mindful meditation, and when I enter mindful meditation, you get all kind of videos, and you get videos that are all different lengths. And I want to remind, Chewy just reminded me that I know at Thomas and I know at Mobile Infirmary, there are relief rooms with massage chairs. I would so encourage you and encourage your staff to do that. Just to sit in the chair and feel the massage and to do some deep breathing. 5 or 10 minutes, that tells your brain that the life-threatening emergency is over. It helps your body go back to baseline. Repetitive prayer is wonderful. Repetitive tapping. That kind of goes back to some of the ancient Chinese trigger point. Repetitive tapping. Just get your hand and just tap on that part. And just kind of notice. Notice what happens in your body. You can enter tapping on YouTube. Again, I love YouTube. Enter tapping on YouTube. It's going to give you some pressure points where you can do your own full tapping, and that does actively turn on that parasympathetic nervous system. Focus on a word that is soothing. Maybe as you're tapping, to say the word internally to yourself, calm, calm. Find a word that speaks to you. Find a word that helps you with that sense of calm. Play with animals and children. There's a reason we love cat videos. Rub a cat. A dog, throw a ball to a dog, laugh with a child. What that does is it tells our brain we're okay. It's okay to be in the moment and to laugh and to play. The emergency is over. Practice yoga and Tai Chi is wonderful. Cardiovascular exercise is the best, because if you think about what adrenaline and cortisol tells our body to do, run or fight, cardiovascular exercise takes care of those neurotransmitters. It depletes the available adrenaline in our body, and we just don't have as much of an alarm going off. Try progressive relaxation. They combine meditation and progressive relaxation. But find what works for you. Do something you enjoy. Do your hobbies. Do what takes you away. A really good hobby allows us to get in that moment. It allows us to let go of the outside world, and it allows to focus on something we love. But even talking about my hobbies, even thinking about my hobbies, helps me calm down. So that is a brief list of ways we can trigger our parasympathetic nervous system. So the trick is turning off the fire alarm or turning down the fire alarm and bringing up all of those things that will help us trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. Again, that was a not exhaustive list. Find what works for you. So, how do we prevent burnout? And they're very similar, but make self-care a priority. I can't tell you how many times I talk to the staff at any of the hospitals and I ask them, are you eating right? Well, no. Are you sleeping well? No. Are you getting your hair cut? Are you investing in taking care of your body? Are you exercising? No. I don't have time for that, or I'm too exhausted when I get off work to exercise. So, to come back to burnout prevention, if you're doing those things routinely, you're less likely to slide down that slippery slope. Make sure you set your priorities. Understand what's important to you and weed out those things that just are not important, particularly at times like these. Develop lasting associations and meaningful relationships and use those relationships. Tell people that you love. Tell people that are close to you, or maybe a trusted colleague, that I'm not doing well. Make me laugh. It's important to admit this, because when you keep it to yourself, what you're doing with that perception is telling yourself, this is awful, I'm the only one, and again you panic about panicking. Practice healthy internal and external dialogue. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this, and please, please, please do this. Do this at work, do this for yourself. Healthy internal dialogue sounds something like, I don't like this is scary, but it's doable. I've got people that love me and care about me, and I love and care about those people, and together we're going to be okay. Nothing's horrible. I was thinking about that word this morning on the way over here. As tough and challenging and painful as this past 18 months has been for all of us, save the word horrible to use internally for really horrible things. This has been really tough. It's been painful. It's been critical. The people in Haiti are going through horrible right now. What we're dealing with is painful and stressful and extremely difficult and grief-stricken. Use words like that with yourself. Try not to use words like horrible and awful and end of the world. Try to tell yourself, I've got this. It's difficult, but we can do this. I've got people that love me. I can rely on them. If you practice that truth-telling internally, then you will use that externally. That involves truth-telling in a compassionate way to your colleagues, your work folks, your family and your friends. And that healthy external dialogue is, you got this. This is really crummy, but we got this. What can I do for you? Because I'm going to need for you to do some things for me. Good job, good save. It's going to sound positive. Avoid groups where you're sitting around talking. I can imagine in my imagination at the hospital, there may be groups saying, this is horrible. It's horrible. Why won't people do what they need to do to stay out of the hospital, and I hate them? And so when you start talking like that, you're telling other people that they need to panic. And when really the truth is, this is just horrifically difficult, but it's not horrible. Please practice truth-telling, healthy internal and external dialogue. Maintain strong personal and professional boundaries. And that's hard to do when you're spending 12, 14, 18 hours at work. Try to keep personal life personal and professional life professional, because then that tells your brain when you're off the clock, it's okay to turn off the alarm. Practice having fun. Practice hobbies, play, as much as possible. Practice spirituality, mindfulness, prayer, and meditation. So, I've talked to you about my hobbies. If you look at this picture, you'll see in the distance Dog River Bridge from a sailboat. I'm a big water person. Water, when I get the image in my head of water, just that helps my body calm down. So that's one of my hobbies. I would encourage you to reconnect with those things you love to do. And even if you can't do them, look at pictures of doing them. Think about doing them, because that tells your brain that there is something in your life other than fire alarms. Okay? Plus, I like my picture. So, takeaways from today, just kind of my summary. I want you to remember that burnout is a progressive physical, emotional, and spiritual deterioration resulting from the constant dosing of neurotransmitters designed to signal our bodies that we're in life-threatening emergency. And with us, it's been 18 months of constant dosing of those neurotransmitters. So no wonder we're experiencing burnout. Our sympathetic nervous system is triggered when we perceive emergency. It is an automatic response and not within our conscious control. It is the fire alarm telling us to fight or flee. When we ignore a fire alarm, we get burned out. Don't ignore your personal fire alarm. Our parasympathetic nervous system engages when the emergency is over. It tells our bodies to rest and digest. We are able to activate the parasympathetic nervous system with self-soothing, mindful activities such as yoga, meditation, hobbies, tapping, breathing, playing. All of those things activate our parasympathetic nervous system. The solution to burnout is to both turn off the alarm and to turn on the sprinkler system. So I've got some references. I'm going to show you this. This is a article, very long article, that was put out by that Gallup organization that is the best thing I've read on employee burnout. It talks about managers, how to help your team. It reinforces everything we talked about today. I would encourage you to print that out and take the time to read it. It is a read well worth your time. And one last thing. When we burn out, we're kind of smelly. We're hard to be around. We exude unhappiness and misery and crankiness and irritability. So what I want to tell you is that if you've recognized yourself today, in other words, if you can smell your burnout, others can too. Please pay attention to yourself. In order to be a leader, you need to do all of these things for yourself so that you can role model them and be a better leader and family member and friend. I appreciate you taking your time today. I appreciate everything you do. You guys have just been amazing this past year, and I've come to have tremendous admiration and respect for everybody in the system that's come together to try to keep our community healthy and safe this past year. I appreciate everything you're doing. Remember that you do have an employee assistance program. One of the services of EAP is to do what I'm doing, but it's also a service of EAP to have some short-term intervention counseling. And we are certainly on the ready for that as well. All you have to do is completely confidential. All you have to do is call our number, and I believe everybody has the EAP card at 478-5050. So I would encourage you to do it all, to take care of yourself, to do it all, and to be as healthy as you can, because we sure need you, and your employees and your families need you. And thank you for listening.